Ooh, that got a little feisty, as Donald Trump's capricious, painful, and unnecessary trade war devastates the American economy and the stock market. Trump himself was confronted by a reporter on that very topic earlier today in the Oval Office, and he became visibly triggered and lashed out at the reporter, who in turn actually roasted him to his face. And we have to talk about it. But before we do, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the subscribe and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, again, the Trump trade policy, or lack thereof, continues to devastate the American economy. And we're going to get into that. But I really want to start with this clip first, because Trump was in the Oval Office taking questions from the reporters. And reporters, of course, want to talk about the economy. And Trump usually tries to bully his way through answers when he doesn't have the facts on his side, or the substance. And of course, in this case, he hasn't neither. But this particular reporter actually gave it back with a pretty funny jab. So, we're going to play this clip and unpack it together.
Tariffs, there's been a lot of on and off, some inconsistency.
There's no inconsistency, only with NBC, which is one of the worst networks on television, by the way. Let me just tell you the inconsistency.
It was your home for a long time.
I have the right to...
Okay, let's stop right there. We've got more to play. But yes, there has been a lot of inconsistency. Even conservative economists, conservative financial analysts, conservative political commentators at the Wall Street Journal and the National Review and other places have all commented on this. Okay, it is a fact that the Trump trade policy is wildly inconsistent, and that is what in large part is spooking the markets. Number one. So he's wrong there. But number two, see how he gets insecure. He lashes out and at the reporter, "You're an NBC reporter." And that's the only place that's inconsistent. It's terrible. The reporter off-screen points out, "Well, it was your home for years." She's referring to the fact that he hosted The Apprentice, right? That was a show, and it was on NBC, so she's basically making fun of him and flipping it out. Okay, well, if NBC sucks, I guess, so do you, because it was your home for years. So either you suck too, or NBC doesn't suck. And you're just having an emotional tantrum. And it's so funny to watch somebody give it back to Trump. That's awesome. It takes a lot of courage to do that to the sitting president of the United States, especially one is so capricious and cruel and vindictive as Trump, so you'd love to see it, but we'll continue.
It was your home for a long time.
I have the right to adjust. And I was called by the automakers as an example, General Motors, Ford, etc. The big three, the big four, and they asked me to do them a favor. Could I delay it for a period of 4 weeks so that they're not driven into a little bit of a disaster for them? They actually love what I'm doing, but they had a problem. And I'm not like a block that just, I won't delay. It's called flexibility. It's not called inconsistency. It's called flexibility.
Well, may I ask you another way?
If they love what you're doing, why would they? Okay. So for context, what Trump is talking about is that his initial proposed tariffs against Canada and Mexico, 25% sweeping tariffs, with no exception, would devastate the automobile industry. Because as we've discussed, vehicles that are sold in the United States usually cross the northern and southern border perhaps 7 or 8 times by the time they make it to a dealership lot and are sold. And if there's a 25% duty every time they cross the northern or southern border, that's going to jack up the price quite a bit, right? Which means consumers will have to pay more, which means the consumers are going to be pissed, or they won't buy cars. It's going to devastate the automobile industry. So they beg Trump for a reprieve. Now, listen to what he's saying. He's saying, I did it to help them out. Well, if you did it to help them out, then you would have made the exemptions in the first place. You would have been more targeted in your tariff approach when you initially announced them. So either you didn't give A or you miscalculated either way. It's a bad look on you, and then when you say that you made an exception to help them out, well, why would you only do it for 4 weeks? Number one. Number two, if they love what you're doing. because he's like, they love what I'm doing. Why would they be so scared and so upset that they had to lobby you for an exception? None of that makes any sense. It's an incoherent answer, because Trump is simply objectively talking out of his ass. We'll continue.
Between inflation, but maybe the most that bothers me is that they would allow millions of people to come into our country that are stone cold murderers, killers, drug dealers, the worst gang members, the worst people allowed into our country, and we're now getting them out. We're going to get them out. We're getting them out. I want to thank Tom Homan, by the way. He's doing a great job. And I want to thank Kristi Noem, who's doing a fantastic job. This is a job that's so unnecessary. This should have never happened. This should have never happened. So we're bringing back our country in many ways, not only financially, and financially we'll be stronger than ever before.
Okay, Trump was the one who signed the deal that he says supposedly is causing America to be exploited. The USMCA, he signed it into law in 2020. He negotiated it, signed it into law, and so if there's incompetent U.S. leadership, then that's objectively his fault. Because the deal that's being executed is the deal that he negotiated, number one. So he just insulted himself, number two. Again, listen to what he says about consistency. I'm not inconsistent. I'm flexible. And yes, flexibility will be what I do moving forward. But also, we won't be flexible moving forward once we get started on April 2nd, which is when these global reciprocal tariffs are supposed to take effect. You see the inconsistency here. He's just objectively stupid. He is objectively inconsistent. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's going on pure ID, right? Like it's just pure impulse on his part. And unfortunately, his instincts suck, right? We've talked about how the conservative Wall Street Journal has been on Trump's ass for months about this. Well, even the National Review, the other major esteemed conservative publication, which is unapologetically pro-Trump even, they are calling him out. Trump's reckless war on Canada. It's a Republican tradition for celebrities to threaten to move to Canada if a Republican is elected president. Now, they may have to look farther afield in his latest escalation of his trade war with Canada. Trump has again referred to the possibility of bludgeoning the country into incorporation into the United States. It was inevitable that Trump would have to deal with foreign crises when he was elected, but no one thought Canada would be among them in response to Ontario Premier Doug Ford placing a 25% surcharge on electricity exports to Michigan, Minnesota, and New York. Trump said he'd impose an additional 25% tariff on Canada's exports on steel and aluminum, on top of the already planned 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum from all foreign countries. For those doing the math, that would be a 50% tariff. Trump also threatened to keep automobiles manufactured in Canada out of the U.S., and suggested Canada becoming our cherished 51st state was the only solution to the contention between the two countries. Of course, the ongoing drama with Canada is fundamentally a Trump production. There was no reason to make a threat of enormous tariffs on Canada a month or so ago, or to inflame Canadian public sentiment with outlandish talk of a sovereign nation, a friendly one no less. Giving up its independent existence rather than deal with the economic pain of us tariffs. This latest flare-up abated after Ford relented. The weakened state of blessedly outgoing Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau creates space for the freelancing of a figure like Ford. It's hard advice for Canadians to hear or heed, but retaliatory tariffs and bomb base of their own probably don't help their cause. Still, there's more where that came from. Trump has ensured that there will be a premium on tough on US rhetoric in the impending election between Trudeau's liberal replacement, Mark Carney. Mark Carney and the talented conservative populist Pierre P. Trump has had constantly shifting justifications for his threats against Canada. First, it was fentanyl and migration, which aren't enormous problems on our northern border. Then, it was Canadian protection for its dairy, lumber, and banking sectors. Long-running issues that don't justify going to DEFCON 1. With Ottawa on Tuesday, it was a Canadian. Having the temerity to punch back against a U.S. threatening to dunk his country into a steep recession. Trump heightened the contradictions when, after exempting the auto sector from his currently delayed across-the-board 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico, he talked of making automakers collateral damage in his tiff with the Premier of Ontario. None of this is good for us business, which is getting whipsawed back and forth almost every day by the president. As for Canada as the 51st state, it now seems to be more than trolling. If Trump is serious, it is unfathomable that we are threatening the sovereignty of a fellow NATO country, a friend that has repeatedly fought and bled along. Cite us if we indulge the hypothetical and Trump somehow impoverishes Canada into submission. It would create a restive, resentful region of the United States where there presumably wouldn't be a lot of Trump voters. It's a journalistic cliché that the most boring headline in the world is "Worthwhile Canadian Initiative for Trump." A worthwhile Canadian initiative would be to stop tormenting Ottawa and work out any trade or border issues in a manner befitting friends and neighbors. The problem, of course, is that Trump is not much of a diplomat. He's a bully, a capricious, malignant narcissist with an authoritarian errand streak a mile wide. And he is deeply, deeply stupid when it comes to substantive trade policy, which is why we are seeing increasing signs of a recession under Donald Trump. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.